if these different tarot decks are like, let's say, a vehicle or a conduit for intuition, how does the different conduits slash gateways affect, manipulate, and converse with our intuition? And that's just such an interesting and fun thing. Hey, this is Joe with Self-Time Tarot, and this is my video response to Kelly Bear's Tarot Decks You Can't Live Without. Now, I will admit that I have watched so many of these videos. I think it's the coolest thing. It's just so awesome to see everybody's different tastes and discover new tarot decks, and it's definitely a community builder. Her first question was, if you could only pick 5 tarot decks for the rest of your life, what would they be? And then she amended it to, if you were going on a year-long trip, what would the 5 decks be that you take? Now, I'm actually going to answer the first question, the original one, because if I were to go on a year trip, my 5 decks would actually be different. But I like the challenge of having to pick only 5 decks, because these 5 decks I feel really, really passionate about. One more note before I get into them. They will probably change in 10 minutes. I mean, I like change, and I'm always changing, and every day I have different top decks, but as of today, these are my top decks I would have to choose to be working with for the rest of my life. Let's do it. Okay, so first off we have the Light Gray Tarot, which is a collaborative deck. So each one of the 78 cards is actually by a different artist, but it is totally, totally readable. It's funny, I used to say to people that would be very skeptical about tarot that the tarot is just like going to a museum and then letting that motivate you, or having a museum experience catalyze unconscious processes and bringing them to light in the conscious realm. And I feel like this deck is literally a museum. It's actually, because every card is by a different artist, so it's kind of like going, just looking through an exhibit. I don't read it that much for clients because, oh, look at that King of Wands. He's ready. He's just so ready. I don't read it so much for clients because I do like the deck I use to be consistent and relatively traditional, because I like to offer clients a more traditional... I am quite a traditionalist, and I like to offer clients a traditional experience and to show them more of a standard tarot, but this does show up sometimes. Look at that Queen of Cups. The court cards in this deck are some of my favorite court cards ever. I purchased this from the Light Gray Art Lab, which is the organization that created it. Love this, all the to-dos. That Two of Swords. I'll just keep going through a few because it's just so wonderful. Look at that Three of Cups, I love it. I feel like the symbolism here is untapped for me, and so I'm still uncovering it. But I do like the cartoon aesthetic. This is probably my favorite death card. Just descending, releasing the body, surrendering, going down. It's wonderful. There's some secret geometry going on. Time symbol. Yeah, so I feel like there's definitely latent symbolism in this deck, I would say. That may not... Here's Odin as the Hanged Man. Love it. The Devil. High Priestess here with the pomegranate. I love this color palette. Yeah, so this deck definitely makes sense, and you can use it as a reading deck. It's almost like pop culture-y, I would say. It's like a grocery bag. It's definitely definitely relevant to our current zeitgeist, I would say. Nine of Cups. Where is your happiness coming from? The Sun. So innocent, so true. Six of Wands. So I'm trying to not let this video turn into a deck review, but I just want to show a few cards that are just really awesome. The Scales being the eyes of justice, that objectivist view. 3D, Three of Wands. just that established vision running its course. Something about the 3D makes so much sense. This is probably my favorite King of Cups ever. Temperance here, a little bit abstract but wonderful. Probably my favorite color palette ever. Here's the Four of Swords, taking off the armor, putting all these things to rest, and just chilling out. And the card, like, a Four of Swords to me is very simple, very much about rest, and this picture is very simple. I like the clarity of it. And then each thing, just each responsibility, taking it off. It's just such a cool image. Then I really do like this Eight of Wands. It makes me think of information technology and networks and online, because the Eight of Wands is all about communication and swift action, and it just makes me think of satellites and internet. Send that email going through like the digital wireless. Okay, next up is the Japri Tarot, or the Japaritza. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but I think it's Japri. So it's definitely an art deck. Hold on. Here are the backs real quick. But it was one of those magical tarot moments where the second I felt these cards in my hand, I knew it was a match made in heaven. I just connected. There was just that spark, and I connected. And every card I drew was so accurate. This deck is just beautiful. I did add the astrological and Kabbalistic attributes to the card, so that's not part of the deck. Power in his hand, Ace of Tides, Tides are water. I mean, like, Eight of Winds, like, you get that captivity here. I think what I like about this deck the most is that the scenery and the landscaping and the scene is very large and involved. It's not something like the Paulina Tarot where it's like so much is happening and it's like difficult to see. I feel that way also about the Shadowscapes. This deck, there's a lot happening, but it's clear. I find I can pick up on all this detail. It's like not too much happening, it's just enough for it paints such an elaborate picture that you could really sink into. I love this. Like, understanding pain, controlling pain, more so than just, oh, heartbreak. No, it's so much deeper than that. It's how we interface with our pain. Nine of Swords / Nine of Winds. You could tell the war of the mind here. Feeling naked, feeling helpless, feeling vulnerable. It really speaks to me of the Yasodic quality. This Justice card is really starting to represent my interpretation of justice, which is the network of karma. Your experiences become subconscious deductions, which become your worldview, which becomes your action and your voice, which becomes someone else's experience. So it's like the network of karma here. I really dig that. Empress, like, see how there's a lot going on here, but it's not like too much. Like, you can take it all in a glance. Probably my favorite Eight of Pentacles ever. This lab guy, this scientist concocting some craziness. Like, you know how scientists, they get in that, or artists, they get in that place where they're just working endlessly alone and they just lose all sense of time and space. I love it. Controlled memories there, yeah. Strength. Okay, so next up is a deck you've probably never seen before. Just kidding. This is the Fountain Tarot. It's definitely the iPhone of tarot cards. And we've all seen this deck. We probably all have it. And it's probably all in our top 5. Or at least it should be somewhere in there. It's such a good deck. Okay, let's check this out. I did add the Kabbalistic and astrological signs onto the cards. And I'm actually very proud of that, because I think they came out really well. I find this deck to be very acute. Like, it's very sharp. It's very clear. It's very honest. Working with it, it's definitely a very honest deck. Very direct. I find it very. Oh, I love this. The Judgment card. Shin meaning tooth. How the teeth can chew away the form of the body, letting go of the form of the body as we return to the one. Destroying conventional designation and the idea of separation. Okay. But yeah, this deck is just very honest. I think it has quite... Oh my god, look at that. Oh, Look at this Eight of Pentacles. I know I said the Japri Eight of Pentacles was my favorite, but this might actually be my favorite Eight of Pentacles. I connect very strongly with the Eight of Pentacles. But yeah, I find this deck to be actually very airy. Very much of the air element in terms of its directness, in terms of its intellectual, in terms of its clarity. It's almost stark, which I really appreciate. Very, very clear. But me and this deck have an interesting relationship. I did follow the Kickstarter it was on, and I did gush over it like everybody else, and I was so into it and so in love with it and couldn't wait for it to finally be released. Beautiful Temperance card here. And then as I got closer to the date, I just kind of fell out of love with it. I guess all my energy, like all my excitement about it was just so much that eventually it just dwindled down. And yeah, I was just like indifferent, and so I didn't get it until a few months later, and then I kind of returned to it and I fell back in love with it. But that relationship continues, like even now as I use it. We definitely have a very on and off relationship. When it's on, it's so direct, it's so clear. I love this Knight of Cups. Like, if this Knight of Cups doesn't say angsty, emotional, teenager, adolescent, I don't know what does, but look at how emotional and dramatic he is. It's just, yeah. I would definitely date this Knight of Cups. He's just looks all types of like emotional and crazy. Totally awesome. Love it. The deck is also very sensitive to the elements. This Eight of Swords rocks. It's just so clear. All this quadrilateral, this cubic, it just makes sense to me. But yeah, it's very sensitive to the elements, so it's easy in reading, especially if you're using a lot of cards, to identify the elemental dignities here and there and how they interact, which is really nice. I do love this Hierophant, the inner voice, because hearing is the sense function attributed to the Hierophant, according to Paul Foster Case, and this just says hearing, listening to that inner voice. So it's not just about doctrine. I mean, it definitely can be. This could be doctrine, but it could also be the doctrine of the inner voice. Very nice. The Fool here. But yeah, it definitely goes well with a Zen approach. Very simple, very here. Like the Two of Cups is like companionship here, and not like we're infatuated and we're obsessed with each other and I love you. It's just companionship, collaboration, people that get along. Friendship, that works. Eight of Wands. Very clear. Love this King of Cups. You could tell he's such a family man. He's there for you. Good vibes, good vibes. That Magician. This Magician to me says mentalism, the law of mentalism, which I really appreciate. Last thing, the cardstock is amazing. It literally feels really good. Okay, so second place goes to Ciro Marchetti's Tarot of Dreams. Now, I had such a I knew I needed a Ciro Marchetti deck in the top 5, but I didn't know which one it was going to be because they're all just so amazing. But I decided to go with his Tarot of Dreams for numerous reasons. First of all, can we just note how amazing it is that the astrological and Kabbalistic symbols are on the card already. Okay, quick story about this deck. So, when I was young, I mean like 10 years old, or 12 or something, I saw this deck on aeclectictarot.com, and I don't think I've ever wanted a material object more in my life than I wanted this deck. So eventually, the deck you could only buy from him specifically, and it was like 80 bucks. Plus shipping, so it was very expensive. Eventually, somehow I got it, and I was the happiest person in the entire world. But it was too big for my hands, so it was just too big. I couldn't really shuffle, I couldn't work with them easily, so I didn't work with them a whole lot besides just admire them, which was fine. So, fast forward to about maybe a year ago, I'm looking for this deck, right, because I have just way too many tarot decks and they're all over the place. I'm looking for it, and I realize I lost it. Lost my most prized possession. Then a few months back, from today, I was in New York, and I just had like a impulse to go to this store called Om Shanti, and I just saw this new edition of the Tarot of Dreams, and I could not believe it that they actually had it on their shelf. So I immediately bought it, and I was so happy. And now I'm older, my hands are bigger, I'm more dexterous, and everything. The story has a happy ever after with me with this new edition deck, and it's just amazing. Look at that moon. Okay, we just need to look at this High Priestess for a second. Check that out. Darkness into darkness, the key to all mystery. Four of Cups. Wow. So yeah, it just helps. The astrological symbols are just so wonderful, like Saturn in Sagittarius, Saturn, the limits, weighting down, the Archer. Yeah, I'm really happy that Chiro decided to include the Kabbalistic symbols because, I mean, I am very much into Kabbalah. Like, that's a very big part of my life and my choreographic process, even, and how I approach life. And so to have that in a deck that's not Thoth or Tot, that's not the Thoth system, is wonderful because it totally can. In first place, we have the Rider-Waite-Smith. This is obviously the Centennial Edition, which has become the new favorite, I think, amongst the tarot community. I like it because I think it might be the closest to the original, but I'm not sure. I do. This might be totally untrue, but I do feel like when I look into these cards, I can see the canvas that they were painted on, or like the paper, like it's that detailed. But that might just not be true at all. I do like the color palette. I do. They do seem old. I'm going to go through them as I talk. I know you've seen them. I am a very progressive person in a lot of my lifestyle and a lot of my belief systems, and even in my art is pretty progressive and experimental. I think the only part of me that maybe is not so progressive is my work with tarot. I do feel like I'm quite a traditionalist, and so that is why the Rider-Waite is the #1 of my top decks. It's what I learned on, and I really do believe that anyone who studies tarot should devote a large amount of time and effort to studying one of the major traditions. I'm not saying you have to use one of the major traditions, but I think studying at least one of them is integral in being a tarosopher, a tarologer, tarot reader, student of the tarot. It's just, this is the standard, and you know, like, just 90% of all decks now are based off of the Rider-Waite, which we all know pretty much. So why not study the source? I always think the closer you are to the source, the more depth and the more accurate you'll understand the subject. And so that's why I do feel like I work with this deck the most, or at least this is my favorite. Also, there's just so much, the symbolism is so rich and so scrupulous and so intentional. It's so considered, every single detail. Also, the systems, astrological and Kabbalistic systems, are, I find, inherently visible in this deck in some way or another. Now, I know that Waite says that Kabbalah has nothing to do with tarot, but then again, you have to consider how much is he telling the truth in his pictorial key to the tarot, because he even admits he only gives us not even like a third of the information of the tarot. Yeah, I mean, there's just so much here. There's just so much, like, the crown being over here and the head being the, like, sunlight. That describes the idea of synchronicity, when your mind and the external physical realm connect, and there's patterns happening outside of yourself and in the external that match your psyche. that's a very Jungian idea, but like, yeah, synchronicity, following those patterns. And it's just a language that I'm so comfortable with. I can go off on this deck forever. Like, I feel like the more comfortable you are with a deck, the more meanings a card can evoke in you. Whereas if you're using a deck and you're not as comfortable with it, you'll see the Fool and you'll start saying things like, oh, new journey, impulse, like very cliche meanings. But when you're very comfortable with the deck, you know, this Fool could mean like going on a trampoline tomorrow, you know, because you're just so comfortable with it that the core meanings are so available to you at a moment that you don't have to rely on them. You could dig deeper. And so that's something I love about this deck, is that these cards, because I'm so familiar with them, they become versatile, actually. They become malleable, the meanings. The language becomes more adaptive to the client. And I think that's the main reason why they give such effective readings. And of course I have my astrological Kabbalistic stuff there. Hey, so those are my top 5 favorite tarot decks that I definitely can't live without. Before I end the video, I'm just going to do a quick draw with the Tarot of Dreams. And I'm just thinking about choices and lifestyle and favorites and taste and culture. Like, with such a eclectic amount of tarot decks out there and favorites and top 5. Just thinking about those kinds of things. Let's see what we pull up. We get the 3 of Coins, 3 of Pentacles, which is Mars in Capricorn, putting Capricorn to work. Okay, this is cool. It just makes me think of working with decks, continuing our path in different traditions, in different ways. I always associate the idea of coloring in the lines with the 3 of Coins. So I would say this is telling us to happily subscribe to different traditions and color in the lines, work within the interesting confines of different tarot decks and see what works. If these different tarot decks are like, let's say, a vehicle or a conduit for intuition, how does the different conduits slash gateways affect, manipulate, and converse with our intuition? And that's just such an interesting and fun thing. How do these different systems catalyze our intuition? And that we just discover that with working with them, and understanding. Being a 3, it's Binah on the Tree of Life, which is understanding. Understanding the form and the structure of these different beautiful works of art. Such a great thing. Cool. Thanks.